as we sit back and look at the vastness that is all of our toy collections, it's kind of hard to realize that every single of these characters had to get approved, usually down to the character level, which take a lot of justification. Well, let's talk about that process here on Spector Creative. Hey guys, welcome back to Spector Creative. I'm your hostess with the mostess. Am I? Not really. I'm Toy Guru Neitlich, but I am your host here on Spector Creative, and we're going to talk today about the approval process of action figures and how it works. So there are two ways this goes, and as a backup, toys are approved in multiple rounds. It's not just like you walk in and say, okay, here's a drawing of the Mandalorian, and I want to make this toy. It doesn't quite work that way. So it starts off with what's called RCR, Rough Concept Review. And this is usually where a B sheet is brought in, meaning a illustration that could show all the figures in a wave, all the figures in an entire year, or one single figure. It can depend on how it's being sold. So as an example, a retail line that has waves, like Black Series or G.I. Joe Classified, they're probably going to get the approval on this at each stage as a set, as a wave, not as a full year, but as, say, 5 or 7 figures, whoever comes in that assortment. Now, the reason you can't get approval for a whole year at once is because prices change. Prices fluctuate all the time. Everything from the cost of petroleum to labor, things are changing constantly. So if you went in and you got an entire year's worth of product approved, well, by the time you got to the last wave, it might not cost the same as the first wave, which is why each individual wave, or in the cases of something like direct-to-consumer, where figures are shipped individually, individual figures. So like when I ran Matty Collector for Masters of the Universe Classics, every single Classics figure had to be individually brought in and justified. Meaning, I'll just grab a figure. I don't know, who do we got here? Mermista, right? And we'll bring up here. Here's Merman. Okay, so we'll bring up two ocean dudes. I think I have Creature on the Black Lagoon on my mind from it being in theaters. Go check it out on the big screen. It's available. All right. So let's say we're going in and we're saying we're going to do Mermista. And we're going to do her with, a swappable, bottom with human feet and mermaid feet. I don't have the human feet. They're back in I think they're in my back room. So I, or whoever the brand manager is, I, in this case, is going to go in and have to explain who this character is, why fans want him, and why we, meaning Mattel, should justify spending the tooling. And usually 99% of the time you are pitching these characters to someone in upper management, call it a suit, if you will, who has probably barely heard of the brand. They just know it as a brand that the company works on. And the idea that they could name any character other than maybe the top villain and top hero and maybe the sidekick is slim to none. So you're basically pitching an audience of executives that have no idea about the mythology or the continuity of a brand. Honestly, that's why they have, why there's online wikis and encyclopedias, because it fills the need. Instead of hiring toy managers who know brands, they hire toy managers that know how to develop products and ship them to retail and hit margin requirements. If you need to learn about the universe and the character, just pick up an encyclopedia or go on Wikipedia or one of the wikis or something like that. So you're definitely dealing with an audience with limited knowledge of the world, if you will, of the continuity of who that character is and why they should be made as a figure. So you're going to get questions like, okay, who is this? Do they appear in the content? Are they in new content? Was there an old figure based on them? Why? You would get questions like, well, why do fans want this character? Why do they want that version? Does it have to come with that weapon? Why are you including a cape? I mean, you'll get pulled apart. And honestly, the idea of leaving an approval meeting with the same product you walked in with is almost slim to none, because it's going to get changed, whether it's for cost or, packaging changes or opinion. I mean, there could be, some member that you're pitching to. It's usually, a couple different executives, like the VP of design, the VP of marketing, the VP of package, and like the VP of legal and finance, if you will. So you're in basically a big conference room and there's 50 people in the audience, designers, marketing people, packaging people from every department. And the marketing person gets up and presents the product line to a panel of upper management with C-suite titles, and yeah, you get hit with all sorts of questions that I think some fans would almost find insulting. It's like, who is that character? Darth what? Why are we doing Rachel Phoenix? Why do we have to do her? Well, because she's needed to complete Excalibur. Who's Excalibur? And why are we completing them? I mean, honestly, these are the kind of questions you'll get. So I was wondering, since I'm so impressed with things like, like Hasbro putting out Rachel Summers and Farrell to complete those teams. But I also know from insider knowledge that those were specifically requested by Marvel. Hasbro didn't come up with those themselves. Marvel insisted that Hasbro make them because Marvel is probably paying more attention to the fan reactions online than Hasbro is, because they're more invested in their properties. Not that Hasbro isn't, but it's sort of like a bridge too far. That's why they rely on things like Whoosh to mail them their top 10 lists every year. The idea that they actually know, and this goes for all toy companies, that companies are keeping like an active list of the most wanted figures is kind of a bit more of a fantasy than reality. Usually you do have some lists, but they're not as thorough, I think, as we as toy fans imagine they would be, I guess, if you will. So yeah, a lot goes into that. You bring up a vehicle, you bring up a playset, whatever it is, every detail gets picked apart, questioned, ask you, why are you doing this? Why does it come with 3 missiles and not 4? Can you remove 2 of them and just have it come with 1? And can you glue the missile in so we can save money on the spring mechanism? I mean, all sorts of things. And it's like, yeah, you bring a toy in, and what you come back with is usually a cost reduced, or it could be approved. You could walk in and you could just get rubber stamped. That happened too, especially when it was someone filling in for someone else. They'd be like, yeah, we trust you. Yeah, sure. You want to do Greedo again? Yeah, that sounds good. You want to do Trapjaw? Yeah, he looks cool. But other times when you get the regulars, yeah, they will just they do that purposefully to make sure you know your stuff. They're basically testing you, if you will. Upper management wants to make sure that their brand managers know why they're doing Venom, or why they're doing Firestorm, or why they're doing Duke or Optimus Prime, or they want to make sure that the brand managers aren't just randomly putting figures out there, or that the same thing like design isn't just slipping in all their favorites. They want to know from marketing, you're doing this figure or this wave of figures, and why are you doing it? Is it because fans want it? Is it because they're inexpensive to make? Is it because we can tool this body and then reuse it for 12 other characters, like Marvel's Beast is a perfect example of that. You tool one Beast body and you can do 50 versions of Beast and use the same tool. So it is definitely not as much as walking in and saying hey, I want to make a Mola Ram figure. Well, you're going to get this. This was probably brought up during the Indiana Jones Adventure series line, and you probably had toy executives being like, do we have to do that guy? I mean, doesn't he rip people's hearts out? And is it kind of like not quite PC? And that's how these things get picked apart, and that is how toy lines get trimmed and hedged and buzzed. Basically, it's like you start off with a big bush, and slowly they're bringing in the clippers, and at the end of the day, it's a small bush, and that's what it's like. And so for every toy you have, it went through multiple battles, and it all depends on who you're pitching to. But most likely, the people you're pitching to are executives who may never have picked up a comic book or watched a cartoon. I wouldn't say in their life, but maybe they haven't in the past 40 years, 30 years since they were kids. So yeah, when you look at your toy collection, it's because you have brand managers who are willing to fight for every individual character and justify every decision, every cape, every color, every accessory. And if you're wondering why a figure doesn't maybe look like the way you wanted it to look, maybe an accessory is missing, maybe there's less articulation than you wanted, it's probably because that toy got caught in the cost reduction approval process, and getting exactly what you brought into that approval room out of that approval room is kind of slim to none. You're going to expect changes, and that's why they happen. So yeah, it's a lot of time justifying a lot of nerdy details, which is why toy companies should hire more nerds. So hey nerds, go apply at toy companies. They need you. All right, cool. Thanks for watching. Thank you for sharing. It's the best way to support this channel, and I'll see you in the next video.